Okie dokie. So I wanted to talk I'm dressing a little less serious um, because life is a paradox. Love is a paradox. As long as we're human beings with a brain, we're going to be experiencing paradox. So it's a serious subject, but I decided to dress fun the way I dress normally. Anyway, basically, um, I wanted to call this video Eclipse because, um, there's several reasons. One is human beings used to fear eclipses. When an eclipse would happen, the tribe would start praying and wailing and, you know, just generally fearful. And then when the sun came back, they were all, okay. But they were feared. And also, an eclipse describes what I'm getting ready to explain about what some people call uh, the shadow work. Uh, so, my experience with shadow work, for example, now there's a couple of experiences. One was doing a 12-step inventory. That's one way to do shadow work. But you can also do shadow work with a therapist. How well that therapist manages to do shadow work depends on how well they've done it themselves. Same thing is true with 12-step programs. You're dependent upon um, the how well the other person applies the 12 steps. A lot of them I found want to apply it to for example, an addiction like drugs or alcohol, and they stop there, and they don't then address it's getting rarer and rarer that they live long enough to address other relationships and quit being in codependent relationships. But, and my experience has shown me that the people in the codependency programs, 12-step programs, don't do the inventories and the shadow work at all. And that's even rarer. So, in general, it's rare that people do shadow work. So there's another way that you can do shadow work. I'm going to explain that. Although I don't know how much exposure you're going to get, opportunity you're going to get if you're leading a comfy life. But I had an opportunity come up. So an example, my daughter comes up to me and says she read an article in Psychology Today. I wish I could quote the article. I wish I could. I wish I had the author's name. I don't. But it was about favorites, like parents' favorites of their children. And my daughter announces, "I know I'm your favorite." And she starts talking about how the article said that, parents have favorites, this and that. I think I did read the article. And after we had this conversation, now my daughter's the eldest, and she was a preemie. And her birth was fraught with a lot of medical problems. So there was also the, sick baby syndrome, guilty mom and trying to, nurse the sick baby back to health. And, so there was more bonding going on than just normal mother baby bonding. And I'm a very intense person. And so, well, I was committed when I was pregnant. I even considered that my baby might not be born normally. And I was like, am I going to go through with this kind of a thing? And not many people do that, because most people idealize pregnancy and they think that their baby is, they assume, they don't even think, but they assume that their baby's going to be perfect and everything's going to be beautiful. And it's a real shocker when it's not. And a lot of babies are born with problems, actually, So, I mean, most aren't, but a lot of them are. Enough to where people should be considering how dedicated are they to that pregnancy. Of course they don't. And with this ban on abortion, at all costs. Well, I'm not going to go into politics. But anyway, so I was like, totally committed and prepared, at least psychologically, for the possibility that I was making a commitment to care for somebody for the rest of my life, because who knows? And sure enough, there were a lot of problems. She was about 5.5 months in the hospital and required 3 different therapies when she got out, until she was the age of about, I think she was 3.5. So I put a lot of, not just like feelings of love, but I mean, I poured my feelings and my dedication into her, and I absolutely adored her. And so then I got pregnant the second time under really bad circumstances. I didn't think I could handle another child, because I was already overwhelmed dealing with a father-in-law that had cancer in the hospital, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So my daughter, fast forward, she's like, I guess 21 at the time, is telling me, oh, I know I'm your favorite. And the first thing that happened was I became acutely aware that we were standing in the dining room and she was saying this out loud, and that her brother, who was 9 years younger, just really emotionally still a baby, 11, 12, somewhere around there, could have walked in and overheard the conversation, and it might have crushed him. So there was a certain amount of fear and like shame that I felt, because she was saying something that was, I thought, you don't talk about that. That's sacred stuff. You don't say that out in the open, And I saw myself saying that, and then I got through that layer, and I said, then I got mad at the author, for violating such a sacred subject, because you're supposed to love your kids equally. And then I realized that when my son was born, that I had this thought cross my mind of, how will I ever love a baby as much as I've loved the first one, And this fear then came over me, that I wouldn't be able to love the baby, even though I had committed to the baby. But that I wasn't going to be able to love the second baby, but it was fear. It was fear. And as soon as I saw it in the context of this fast forward, where we're standing in the dining room and not in the moment that I felt the fear when I had the baby, and the baby's so vulnerable, I was somewhat removed emotionally. I saw it was just fear. And I let go of it. Okay? I let go of the shadow, the thing I was worried about, the thing I was afraid of, the thing I didn't want to look at in myself was just fear. Sometimes the shadow work we have to do is nothing but smoke and mirrors. It's just the fear. And when I let go of it, because I had dealt with fear before, when I let go of it, all of a sudden, I saw my son with new eyes. There he is, preteen, and I'm like looking at him with completely new eyes. Like, man, what a kid. I totally fell in love with my son. It was amazing. And I said, wow, this was really catalytic. This article, this was really, and I became grateful that the author was, speaking openly about the subject and stimulating this in me, to dig up this stuff and start dealing with it. I was like, wow, he's got such a good sense of right and wrong. I never taught him that. Was he born that way? I started getting in conversations with him. I started noticing him differently. And it's like this whole world opened up. And so I'm calling this an eclipse, because when you don't do the shadow work and you don't look at the fears or the anxiety or the hate or the whatever it is, the resentment or whatever dark thing you don't want to look at, you eclipse the sun. And that's S-O-N and S-U-N. You don't see the person fully, the other person fully. You're eclipsing the sun because you don't want to really look at the shadow work. It's like the moon blocks out the sun. And that's the way it is. You're so busy suppressing the dark that you don't want to look at, that you're ashamed of, or you're whatever it is, that you don't see what's on the other side, which is daylight. It's like night and day. So that's why I'm calling it eclipsing. And everybody does it. Well, I say everybody. I have hope. I have hope. And that's why I'm talking about it. you're in a permanent eclipse. You're missing out huge, big time. Really good things are back there behind the eclipse. But it's not going to be revealed to you until you do the work. So you're not really living life until then.